I was the most allergic kid in the world for about 14 minutes. Story 1. I was 23 at the time, and now I'm 27. We went to visit my sister while she was studying abroad in France, and everything went smoothly on the way there. We even managed to get window seats, which made the journey pleasant. However, the real issue arose during the 7-hour flight back. When booking our flight, my dad was told that it would likely be empty, and we could choose any seat we wanted. To our surprise, the plane was fully booked, and our assigned seats were in the middle of the middle row. My dad leaned over and whispered to me to just go along with whatever he said when we were boarding, because there was no way he'd sit in the middle row for 7 hours. I braced myself for what was coming. As we boarded the plane, my dad pulled aside a flight attendant and informed her that he had been assured he would be able to get a window seat, even though we hadn't booked one. She explained that the plane was full, and there was nothing she could do. My dad then glanced at me and said, "No, you don't understand. My son is severely autistic, and he won't make it through this flight without a meltdown if we don't get a window seat." I froze, feeling like I was being forced into an uncomfortable role. I decided to stay quiet and focused on my phone, playing games. The flight attendant asked, "What do you mean by meltdown?" My dad, in his blunt, folksy voice, replied, "Oh, honey, you don't want to see it. He'll be making a mess all over, probably." They went back and forth for a minute, with my dad convincing her while I continued to stare at my phone. She went to talk to someone and then returned, asking us to follow her to the back of the plane. We stood at the very back on the left side while she went up each row, asking passengers if they would be willing to trade seats due to our unusual circumstances. By the 3rd or 4th row, she found some college-aged guys willing to trade seats for flight vouchers or something, and we got the coveted window seats. My dad happily took the window seat. Another flight attendant came by, offering assistance, and I softly grunted my thanks. The rest of the flight went smoothly, and I acted mute whenever the crew was around. I want to make it clear that I don't condone such behavior. I have friends with autistic kids, and I love them dearly. I might even be on the spectrum myself. My dad, however, has a knack for resorting to unethical tactics. He could write a book on his unconventional life hacks. Story 2. I regret raising my siblings. My mother went to federal prison when I was 17. She had been in and out of county jail throughout my entire childhood, never for drugs or prostitution, but typically for offenses like retail theft and bad checks. She had 6 children by 5 different men, 3 boys, then 2 girls, and finally another boy. I am the oldest child, and she had me when she was almost 19. My youngest brother is 15 years younger than me. She was involved in mortgage bank fraud and served nearly 8 years in the federal system. My grandma assisted us, but she also got entangled in legal issues for not cooperating against my mother, resulting in her serving 9 months in federal prison. Tragically, she passed away just 9 months after her release. I managed to obtain full guardianship of my 2 brothers, who were closest to me in age, and one of my sisters. I maintained this guardianship for each of them until they turned 18. My sister, however, was able to live with my mother for most of her teenage years, because my mother was released by that time. Unfortunately, my brothers were over 18 or almost 18 when she came home. For the sake of anonymity, we'll refer to my brothers as A and B, and my sister as C. Brother A is alive and well. He is employed, married to a nurse, owns a home, and has 2 children. On the surface, Brother A seems to be doing well, but there's a reason for my regret. Brother B is deceased. He was killed at the age of 19 in 2016 in a setup involving gunfire. He was lured by someone he considered a friend, under the pretense of selling him some weed. At the time, his girlfriend was 5 months pregnant, and she gave birth to my nephew. A year and a half later, Brother A got Brother B's baby's mother pregnant, resulting in another nephew. This situation understandably created tension and complications. Brother A was never in a romantic relationship with her, nor did he intend to date her. Initially, he was not involved in his child's life during the first year due to his wife's then-girlfriend. Disdain for the baby. Brother A was also struggling with substance abuse and was lost in life. I managed to get him into rehab, and since his rehabilitation, he has distanced himself from the family, largely influenced by his wife. Brother A even attempted to separate our nephew from our deceased brother from his own son unless two adults were present. Brother A's wife and my wife do not get along, primarily because of her privileged background compared to our own. This cultural clash and judgmental atmosphere permeate every interaction. It's not just with my wife. Brother A's wife has these issues with our entire family. Despite our efforts to love and accept her, she remains disinterested. Brother A and his wife now have a daughter, and our family is not allowed to know her. While Brother A can't prevent us from knowing his son because his son's mother, who also had a child with our deceased brother, is like a sister to our family. This situation has only worsened the overall tension. Brother A was fully aware of these dynamics, but chose to act as if she was a sister to him as well, creating confusion and discord. Moreover, Brother A has made up disturbing allegations about our deceased brother's 6-year-old son, and even had his lawyer put these claims in writing in an attempt to separate his son from his nephew. Sister C is 18 years old and has a speech problem while being on the autism spectrum. However, she refuses to acknowledge this as an adult. She is currently not employed and obtained her diploma online during the COVID-19 pandemic, where she cheated on her assignments. She became pregnant at 17, and we didn't discover the identity of the father until well into her pregnancy. Sister C continuously lied about the father's age, providing multiple names and ages. Eventually, we found out that he is the same age as me, in his 30s. Shortly after giving birth, she entered into a new relationship, moving in with her new boyfriend. A significant falling out occurred within the family over her lifestyle choices, particularly taking her newborn to a man's house she barely knew. Sister C was also involved in an incident with my other sister and my mother-in-law, which led to the police being called. This incident resulted in Sister C demanding that I pay for her phone to be repaired, even though the front had already been fixed by someone else. She insisted that I fix the back of her phone, attempting to guilt me by suggesting I didn't care about my niece. She claimed that she would miss doctor appointments, but in reality, it was only the back of her phone that was affected, and she was still able to communicate through it. Sister C told me that she knows more about parenting because she has a baby. Unlike me, she used the phrase "something you created" to emphasize this point. So, my two current stepsons, whom I've raised for the past 6 years, don't count because they're not biologically related to me. Similarly, my siblings, including Sister C, whom I struggled to provide for and raise, don't count because they're not my biological children. Therefore, I've raised 3 children, one of whom is now deceased, and I've lost contact with the other 2. Honestly, the disappointment they bring me has caused immense emotional pain. I often find myself crying when my wife isn't around or when she's asleep. I'm not ashamed for her to see me cry. I just don't have anything left to say about the situation. I often wonder why my brother was taken from us, why my other brother is acting this way toward me and his family, and why my sister is living the way she is. I raised all of them with the hope that they would become better people, putting in tremendous effort despite being a young adult. I attended every doctor appointment, school meeting, an IEP, individualized education program, meeting. I worked 7 days a week at 2 jobs and even gave up my plans for college to work and provide for them. It cost me a great deal of time and effort, and I deeply regret not investing that time and effort in myself. I'm not where I want to be in life, and I never imagined having such a strained relationship with any of my siblings, especially the ones I raised. I constantly feel like a failure. Story 3. The time an actual murderer tried to kill me, and I survived. It wasn't some hardened criminal, a scary-looking skinhead, or a badass gangster. It was a little old woman, but she was a genuine killer. She had shot her husband in the chest with a shotgun 2 years prior to me meeting her. She had not served any jail time because she had numerous witnesses who had confirmed her story of self-defense. The rumors circulating in the neighborhood told a different tale. But regardless, she had indeed taken a man's life, and the shotgun that leaned in the corner of her foyer was quite possibly the murder weapon. Anyway, I met this woman at the height of my drug addiction. I'm sober now, approaching 6 years, but at the time, I was addicted to opioids. My favorites were opioids. My favorites were specify the name of the opioids. A fellow addict gleefully informed me that we had a promising new supplier who sold her 70-pill prescription each month, Miss Coco. I went to her address the very next day and realized that this woman lived only a few streets down from my friend Selena. I decided to stop by Selena's place first to say hi. When she asked me why I was in the neighborhood, I told her I was coming to see Miss Coco, and her expression changed. That's when I learned not only the story of the murder, but also a slew of other crazy tales about the things she had done to people in the neighborhood. Selena begged me to be cautious, but I thought to myself, whatever, she's just an old woman. I'm not scared. So I headed to the address of her little shotgun house and knocked on the door. She was supposed to be expecting me. The door cracked open just a sliver, and I saw how short and old she was. All I could really see was a slice of her face and one of her bloodshot eyes. She asked my name. I told her, and she opened the door for me, gesturing for me to come inside. Right away, I noticed the shotgun leaned in the corner. She told me to follow her, and I finally got a real good look at her. She looked so feeble, not skinny but short, hunched over and walking with a cane. Her head was wrapped in a silk bonnet, and she was wearing something like a muumuu. Diabetes had taken part of her left foot. We were in the living room now, and she asked me to sit down. I chose the only empty spot on the couch. The entire house was cluttered, but it was not dirty. Suddenly, I noticed an oddly placed rug on otherwise bare floors, making me wonder how hard it would be to get blood out of wooden floorboards. Did Selena say she actually killed that guy in here? She offered me a drink and a snack. She looked at me with surprisingly kind eyes. What a strange drug deal, I thought, but how sweet of her. I remember thinking Selena was foolish for buying into all the neighborhood tales of how dangerous this woman was. I drank a soda, declined a snack, and purchased her entire script of pain pills. She informed me that she'd be getting it filled again on the same day next month. Okay, great, see you then, I replied. I returned on a routine schedule for several months, always drank a soda, declined a snack, and went happily on my merry, intoxicated way. I got to know her a bit during my visits, her struggles with diabetes, stories about her kids, and how helpful she found weed for managing her pain. I occasionally brought her a joint to share. One day, I even helped her move some furniture. However, she never mentioned her late husband, and I didn't bring it up. Over time, any wild ideas about this old, sweet woman possibly snapping at any moment had completely faded from my mind. One summer month, it was my day to visit Miss Coco. My friend Shane was with me already, so I decided to let him ride along. We arrived at her place, went inside, and followed the same routine as always. She looked at Shane somewhat suspiciously, but I assured her he was good people, and she allowed him in. During our conversation, Shane mentioned wanting to see a movie that had just come out. Unfortunately, I can't recall the movie's title. Miss Coco got excited and told us she happened to have a bootleg copy of that exact movie that we could borrow. She allowed us to look through a giant stack of bootlegged, burned DVDs and borrow whatever we wanted. We chose 3 of them, and she simply asked that we return them when we were done. That night, we decided to watch the movie Shane had wanted to see. However, as soon as we played it, it was unwatchable. It seriously looked like it had been filmed on a cell phone. You could see people in the theater walking around in front of the screen, and the person recording it was talking loudly to their date the entire time. It was garbage. We had a good laugh about it, assumed the other 2 DVs were just as bad, and watched something else. A few days later, I was going to hang out with Selena, so I thought I'd swing by and return the DVDs to Miss Coco. I tried calling, but she didn't answer. I walked up to her doorstep and knocked, but still received no response. I figured it wasn't a big deal, so I decided to leave the DVDs by her door. She had a storm door with a screen on the top half and solid metal on the bottom half. I opened the door, propped up the subpar dev against her actual door, and then closed it. This way, they couldn't be seen and were protected from the weather. I went on to Selena's place without giving it a second thought. Later that night, I was getting high with my friends when my phone started ringing. I was seriously faded, so I initially decided to ignore it because I didn't feel like talking. But it rang again and again. Finally, one of my buddies asked me, "Aren't you going to answer that?" So I pulled out my phone to check it, and it was Miss Coco calling. She never called me, especially not late at night. Having her number in my phone was strictly for the purpose of me calling her on the 12th of each month to announce what time I would be coming over. Nothing more. However, today was only the 9th. I wondered if something bad had happened, and she needed help, so I called her back. She was furious. I mean, absolutely livid. She did not sound like the sweet old lady whose couch I chilled on. She was extremely angry about the fact that I had left her DVDs by the door. She lectured me about how a dumbass white person like me just didn't understand how things worked in the hood. Someone could have seen me leave them there and decided to steal them. I should have waited until she was home, she scolded. I was disrespectful, rude, and ungrateful. She went on and on. I didn't respond with an attitude, and I did apologize. But I also mentioned that even though I appreciated the gesture, the movies were really quite terrible and not worth much. Abruptly, and very eerily, her tone changed. Suddenly, she was the sweet old Miss Coco again. She told me I was right, and she was just a little on edge that night. She apologized for her reaction and told me I was good to her and didn't deserve that. Then, she casually mentioned that she'd gotten her prescription early this month. Picking it up earlier that day, she asked why I didn't come over and get it tonight. Now, any sane, sober person would have immediately noticed red flags here. But in my infinite, drug-induced wisdom, I thought Junkie Jesus had performed a miracle for me, and my night was about to get even better. It was time to get extra faded, bros. I told my friends I'd be back with more goodies ASAP and headed down the street to Miss Coco's house. I was still very, very high as I approached the house, and I noticed that the DVDs were still there. Coco opened the door before I even reached the steps and instructed me to pick up the movies and bring them inside. Her voice was stern, which was unlike her, but she didn't sound as crazy as she had on the phone. I brought the DVDs into the living room, the usual place where I would sit. But something felt off. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I realized she was still behind me in the foyer area. She began saying the same thing she had on the phone, but this time she was calm. My back was still turned to her, and I remained silent. I set the DVDs onto a side table, and despite being extremely intoxicated, it finally dawned on me that I wasn't there to pick up pills. A brief moment of sobriety, of the survival instinct variety, kicked in all at once. Everything became clear and vivid, a memory I'll never forget. I knew she was standing precisely where the shotgun was leaning. I knew she was between me and the door. I knew she wanted to kill me, and I knew she likely had a group of locals ready to corroborate whatever story she came up with. In a matter of seconds, every single detail that Selena had described to me the day she warned me about Miss Coco played through my mind. I ran. I burst out of the back of the living room, knocking over that stack of terrible bootleg DVDs as I scrambled past it. To be honest, once I had found my way out the back door, I wasn't that scared anymore. It wasn't like she was going to catch me. I circled back around the tiny house and took off down the street, probably before she even managed to hobble around and look out the front door for me. I never did see if she actually picked up the gun. My back was to her, and I made the decision to run without even turning around. But I just knew. I felt it. It was a feeling I won't soon forget. The scary part was realizing just how mind-numbingly high I had been, and how oblivious I was until the very last second. And that's the story of how I narrowly escaped being taken out by a crazy little old lady with a shotgun, all because of the world's worst bootleg DVDs. It makes you wonder what minor offense her late husband committed. Yes, this is a true story, and I have many more drug-fueled wild encounters if any of you would like to hear more. Thank you very much for watching. Your interest means a lot to me. I hope you had fun with the Reddit stories. I'd love a like from you. Drop me your thoughts on the posts in the comments. And remember to subscribe to channel and activate bell. Have a fantastic day. See you soon.